My dad's job requires him to go inside people's houses. He's been in thousands of apartments and houses, so I asked him what was the creepiest or weirdest thing that he ever saw or experienced. And this is what he told me. So my dad arrived early at this apartment complex around 7 a.m. because he had to go through every apartment, doing some maintenance starting from the basement. He entered a laundry room located in the basement where there was a man, around 50-ish, wearing a nice white t-shirt with a tie, suits and pants, but had no shoes, and he had a green tarp in his hands. He thought it was kind of weird, but just ignored it since it was not his business. Later that day, he left to go to a local coffee shop to spend his break, and when he came back to work, there were police cars surrounding the area just everywhere. Out of curiosity, he asked one of the police officers what was going on, and it turns out that a homicide was committed. Dad then asked if what he saw was related to this crime, and boy, was it ever. So after the police interrogation, they told him that the man without shoes stabbed his mother to death in his bathtub, wrapped her in a tarp and dragged her outside. The police allegedly caught this guy dragging his dead mother in the backyard. Of course, they didn't let my dad do his job in the murderer's apartment until after a proper investigation. A while goes by though, and my dad gets to go back in there to finish whatever he was doing, and he said that he just felt really uncomfortable doing plumbing and other maintenance in a house where someone got brutally murdered, especially in a bathroom where the bathtub was still full of dried up blood. So I've lived in my townhouse now for over 2 years, and I could tell right away that the vibe was off when I first moved in. And things were really bad for a while, but now they've just gotten so much worse. So I have a stair that I call the murder stair because I constantly trip or get hurt on this one stair. This is the same stair that I'll see a face watching me from while I'm in the living room. I constantly see someone on the stairs from the corner of my eye while I'm in my living room too. The main thing on the stairs is a face. It looks like a young boy watching me quite often. It looks like it's just peering around the corner and watches me when I'm alone. I'm not sure how to describe the face, but it's really grey with black tones, black eyes, and really funky teeth. I don't feel threatened when it's watching, but more like it's just keeping an eye on me, if that makes sense. So my son has come to me and asked me if I was watching him brush his teeth because he saw someone behind him when he was brushing. Or he's told me about the scary person that he sees in his room sometimes. Now, I haven't talked to him about what I've seen at all, so I know that he's not lying to me either. I've also had maintenance men freak out while doing work in my place, but there was an older guy doing work in my kitchen while I was there talking with him, and he whipped around behind me and asked if somebody else was here because he saw someone walk up next to him. I can usually tell if it's in my living room too because it will mess with the blinds on my curtains. It also will sometimes throw water bottles or Febreze bottles off of the countertops or dressers. It calmed down a bit when I got my therapy dog, but now she'll just randomly stop and watch the stairs, especially at night. And she won't step on the stairs if it's dark or if I'm not with her. She watches certain areas too that I usually see the face, and she does not like being left on the stairs alone. But she also will randomly start and then run upstairs like she's just running from something. Anyway, today I'm going to try my rosary beads to hang on the stairs where the spot that I see the face most is, and I'm going to try again today to take my phone and set it up to record it just to see if anything happens. Mainly because it's actually not limited to nighttime, but it also occurs in the day. I haven't spoken to my son about anything yet. He's on a road trip with my parents and won't be back until Saturday, but wish me luck, guys, and if I see anything or find anything on my phone, I'll be sure to show you guys. A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting in my car in a parking lot on the lake, waiting on a friend. The lot had a few cars in it, and it was only about 5 p.m, so it was in no way dark or empty, and I felt completely safe. I was just mindlessly scrolling through Reddit when I saw a truck pull up on my passenger side. I looked up for a second, but didn't think much of it. I mean, it wasn't super close to me, but maybe a parking spot or two between us. Pretty much as soon as I looked back down to my phone, the truck peeled off so quickly it startled me, and I looked back up. It quickly did a U-turn in front of my car and sped up next to my drive side, barely missing hitting me and stopping so close to me that he was blocking my door and part of the front of my car with his truck, making it impossible for me to get out or drive away. There were 3 men in the car, all smiling at me so big and creepily that the whole thing just sent shivers down my spine. "What you doing, hun?" the driver asked in a flirty tone. I tried to hide how startled I was and responded as nonchalantly as I could muster. "Just waiting on my boyfriend. He'll be here any minute." His smile instantly dropped into a scowl and never returned. "Is he big?" His expression in combination with his words made it feel like a threat. I'm a petite young girl that waits tables and bartends. I've been in similar situations many times before. I know from experience the only way to handle these guys is confidently. They come on stronger when they can sense you're nervous. I laughed loudly and answered, "Judging by your truck? Yeah, he's bigger than you where it matters. Do yourself a favor and leave before he gets here, alright?" I thought that I had them. I mean, why would they be interested in a girl that mocks your truck and your dick, right? But boy, I was wrong. "Well, how about you just get out of here before he shows up, and I can show you I ain't compensating for nothing." He didn't say it flirtatiously. He was pissed when he said it, I could tell. These guys were already creeping me out, but now I was terrified I was going to be kidnapped. The parking lot wasn't empty, but as I was waiting on someone to meet me, I parked as far away from the other cars as I could. It also dawned on me in this moment that most of these cars were probably empty, since most people would probably be out at the lake, as this is a boat launch. It didn't help too that they looked huge. I'm 95 pounds at 5 feet tall, and the boyfriend that I was meeting was not much bigger. I continued trying to joke the whole thing away, but these men were not laughing. The driver was getting angrier and angrier the longer we spoke. I was getting annoyed too, making less jokes, telling them more straight up to just leave me alone, but they just wouldn't leave. I'm not sure if it was out of fear or pure annoyance, but adrenaline kicked in hard at this point. And I just started screaming at them, "Fuck my boyfriend. I'm gonna beat your ugly asses myself if you don't get the hell out of my face in 10 seconds. As I dramatically threw off my seatbelt, pulled my seat away from the steering wheel and pretended to start climbing out of my passenger seat, as they still had my driver's side door blocked. It was at this point that they hurried off yelling about how nobody's friendly anymore. And thank God that they didn't hang around long enough to see my tiny self hop out of my car, or the size of my friend. I live in Adelaide in South Australia. I moved to the city from a small country town with my partner, Mrs. Bradjikarp, roughly 10 years ago now. But we moved into a small 2-story townhouse with another friend. It was a really nice place too, clearly an older building, but the interior had been modernised. So everything started off okay. Our friends took the master bedroom, which came with a walk-in robe, while we took the room next door. Both bedrooms and bathroom were on the second floor. Under the stairs was a small broom cupboard. We didn't use it much at first because, for some reason, it was extremely cold in there. But nothing could heat it up either, not even a heater, which was weird. We assumed that there was a hole leading to the outside somewhere or something, and we just left it at that. It was about a month into living there, though, that the first weird thing occurred. So I was home alone, sitting downstairs with the TV on quietly while I read a book, and I heard my name. I looked at the TV, thinking that someone on there must have also been named Bradjikarp. But no, nobody on the episode of Scrubs was named that. Out of sheer curiosity, though, I turned the TV off and listened intently. And there was nothing. So I figured it must have been my imagination and went to turn the TV back on. As I pressed the power button, I heard my name again, though, and the voice was definitely coming from upstairs. I've believed in the paranormal since I was a kid, due to other experiences, but this, for some reason, just really got my hairs on end. I called Mrs. B and asked when she would come home. And not until tomorrow, I'm staying at my mum's overnight, she said. Our other housemate was also away. Great, so I just turned the TV back on and raised the volume, found some blankets in the cold cupboard, and slept downstairs that night. The name calling continued on and off for a few months, but our other housemates never heard it. In fact, she didn't believe in any paranormal things and thought I was just making it up. Mrs. B did, though, and agreed that there was something else in the house, because not long after, our housemate moved out and we took over the master bedroom. A few days later, a handyman came to install the TV antenna plugged on the wall downstairs. To get wires through the walls, we had to get into the crawl space upstairs. It was around lunchtime and we had an awesome takeaway place around the corner. I let the guy know that I was ducking out for 10 minutes or so to grab some food and left him in the crawl space. When I got back, I found him downstairs looking really confused. "Hey, did you come back about 5 minutes ago and call my name?" he asked. I said no, and he explained that he heard the door open and close and that his name was called. He chalked it up to the next door neighbor, but I knew that it wasn't. The real terror, though, began about a week after that. So I came home from work at around 8 p.m. Mrs. B was working late and wouldn't be home until midnight. But when I walked into the back door, I directly heard her call my name from upstairs. I called back that I didn't think she'd be home yet, and made my way upstairs. Opening the bedroom door, I instantly realized that it was not Mrs. B who called me. A wave of hate just burst from that door and hit me like a ton of bricks, and never before and never again have I ever felt a presence like that. Whatever the hell it was, did not like me at all. I quickly got changed and I took a look around the room. The walk-in robe had a white curtain for a door, and I closed it every morning when we left the house, and it was wide open. I raced downstairs and left the house, and I just went to the pub that day. I met Mrs. B at home when she finished and told her what happened. She didn't believe me at first, but when she saw how terrified I was of our room, she realized then that I wasn't lying or trying to pull the wool over her eyes. The hate in the room was gone at this point, but I could still feel something. We went to bed, though, and I closed the robe curtain again. I swear that I could feel eyes on me as I did so, though, and I slept on the side of the bed furthest away from it. And in the morning, you probably guessed it, but that curtain was wide open again. We lived in that house for a couple of months after that, and I never experienced the hate as intense as that again until our final day in the house, but there was definitely still something there, something that didn't want me there too. I put all my clothes in the spare room so I didn't have to go in the walk-in ever again, because that's where whatever it was felt strongest to me. It was also the location of the crawlspace hatch. My friends heard the voices call out sometimes, but nobody else felt the presence like I did. And the day we moved out, I was the last one there, and as I was checking over all the rooms and locks for the last time, I heard my name again. I shivered, but this time I ignored it and kept doing what I was doing. I checked the last lock and walked out of the house for the last time. I got in my car and looked up at the master bedroom window, and I swear to you that, without a doubt, there was a woman up there glaring at me. That feeling of just pure hatred hit me for the last time, and I floored it out of that street and never looked back. Mrs. B to this day doesn't believe me about that because she didn't see it with her own eyes. I can appreciate the need to see to believe, but I know what I saw, and I really hope that I never see it again. From what I've heard, the tenants after us didn't stay long either. I did some research, but couldn't find any deaths in that home, so I'm not too sure where whatever it is came from. All I know is that it was absolutely real and, quite honestly, scared the hell out of me. A few years ago, my boyfriend and best friend of 4 years had just dumped me. I was using this website, Meet Me, to meet people in my area while I was in college. My profile clearly stated that I was not explicitly looking for anyone to date, just wanted to meet new people. I had just been dumped, so I was really just trying to put myself out there, and I'm not really the type to go out. In my area, there's a giant dance-a-thon that my university did every year to raise money for a children's hospital. I had someone message me and ask if I had heard of it. I told him that my dance team usually performed at it every year. He told me that he was actually one of the children that was supported by the event when he was younger. I thought that was really cool, so I asked him a little bit about his experience with that and genuinely thought it was interesting. After a while, that conversation was kind of dead and I didn't really have much else to say. Plus it was getting late and I kind of wanted to go to bed. So I told him, and after about 10 minutes of laying in my bed trying to sleep, I got another notification. I glanced at it real fast and this dude had honestly sent me a novel. After this event, I swiftly deleted the account, so unfortunately I don't have access to the exact messages, so I'm going to do my best to remember it. But the first one went a little something like, "Look, I'll be honest, I really want to keep talking to you. In fact, I'd actually really like to take you on a date sometime. You seem like a really nice girl and really sweet and interesting. I think we would get along extremely well. I'm kind of alone in this world." Insert long-winded commentary about his loneliness here, and he also did not use any punctuation, so it took me a while to actually dissect all of the message. I responded and told him that I wasn't interested. He was about 7 years older than me too. I was 20 at the time though, and tried to just say goodnight again. Then he responded with another novel along the lines of, "I don't think you understand. You are perfect for me. You were made for me. I'm sure of it. God speaks to me, you know. God wants us to be together and we will be. One day, you will be mine." I'm trying to be polite because he was so nice earlier, and I guess I'm naive or something. I don't totally know, but I kept responding, trying to let him down easy. And here are some more of the highlights. He says, "Maybe not today and maybe not tomorrow, but God has decided this. Who are we to deny him of his plan? Someday in the future, we will end up together. You will realize it soon. We're going to have 3 children. I know their names, 2 boys, 1 girl. God spoke their names to me. I wrote them down when I was 7 years old and I still have the paper. Do you know how I know you're going to be my wife? Because I wrote your name down with it. You will be my wife. Don't make a mistake. God is talking to me now. He's saying your name to me. And I can't let you leave." And at that point, I blocked and reported him, noped the hell off the site, and went to bed, all creeped out. Morning came though, and he had found me on Facebook, and he was going on and on and on, starting with comments along the lines of, "Where did you go? How could you do this to me? You're denying your fate." And he did it all night long, literally all night. I freaked out, told him to leave me alone pretty aggressively and blocked him. I deleted all of the social media apps off of my phone for the next few days. I asked my roommates to stay at home with me. They agreed after I told them what had happened. And I was actually genuinely afraid that this dude was going to come and find me. I mean, he was local, and I had made nice conversation by telling him my major and some clubs I was in. He could have showed up anywhere, but thankfully, he didn't, and that was the end of that. For now, at least. So I literally just got off work about an hour ago, and I'm honestly debating if I even want to go back tomorrow. So I work for a food truck, and our trucks are based out of a joint building. The building is a really old historical building. It used to be an old skating rink back in the 60s or around that general time period. But now the building is composed of the food truck business, a bakery, and a solar panel company, all located in different sections, mind you. The bakers that come overnight to do their work have told me that they've experienced strange things like disembodied voices and things disappearing and reappearing and everyone just being confused but eventually getting used to the activity. There was one elderly baker that told me that he would hear the sound of roller skates rolling across the floor or footsteps coming from the stairs when he was working alone at night. And it didn't just happen once. I always hate coming in late at night and finishing up work while my manager finishes the CDL inside the office. I'm normally pretty okay when I'm alone anywhere, but I absolutely hate being alone in there specifically. I've never experienced anything creepy at my job. That is, until this night. I brushed off all the paranormal stories that the bakers would tell me and not pay any mind to it, especially when I'm alone at work. So basically, I finished up some dishes and I locked the doors. I flicked the lights off and started making my way towards the exit at the end of the large hallway. I turned around to close the door behind me and to lock it, when suddenly I paused, and I noticed something that, honestly, I will never be able to unsee. At the end of the hall towards the baking area, I saw this really tall, solid black figure of a man. It looked like he was wearing a suit and a hat, maybe? he was towering too, probably like 8 feet tall. My heart and stomach instantly just dropped and my body just felt like it was vibrating. My eyes were probably as wide as a barn owl's and I got a cold sweat in my hands almost instantly. I didn't breathe or gulp or anything. I was honestly just scared stiff. He didn't move or anything and he just stood there, ominously. I couldn't see his face, but just his silhouette. His silhouette was also just pitch black, like the blackest black I've ever seen. I don't know how long I was staring at whatever it was, but I closed the door as soon as my brain and body would allow me. I locked it, and then I just went straight to my car. I feel bad for not telling my manager that I left, but I just didn't want to sit around any longer, especially since we're surrounded by woods here. I had the creeps all the way home, and I still do now, and I really do not want to go back there. This is technically my mother's story, although I'm also in it. So when I was 4 months old in 1994, my mum and dad had been having some money issues and, as a result, he would often work late. One late Wednesday night, around 9 p.m, there was a knock on the door and my mum put me down in the living room and went to see if it was Dad, having forgotten his keys. She opened the door without looking properly and a man was standing on the doorstep. He smiled at her and asked if he could use our phone as his car had broken down. Flustered, she said yes and walked backwards a little to let him get the telephone that lived on the hall table. However, he didn't stop at the table and he kept walking up the hall towards her. She asked him what he wanted, pointing at the phone, saying it was right there, and said that her husband was getting out of the shower. And this is where it starts getting really creepy. So he stopped walking, cocked his head to one side, said that he didn't hear the shower running, and then gave her a really big smile. He added that he thought it was just her home right now, wasn't it? Mum said at this point that all she could think about was trying to make it to me, maybe dropping me out of the window, trying to get us into the bathroom that had a lock in it, praying to any god or gods that were listening that Dad would pull up in the driveway, just anything. And then she heard a growl. Mum had been out getting the washing in from the outside laundry before she'd gone in to check on me in the living room and had left the back door open a crack. And our Doberman, Pride, had gotten in the house and had walked out of the kitchen into the hallway between Mum and this man. She started growling and showing all her teeth, and Mum told him to get out now, before she set the dog on him. Apparently, he freaked out and backed out of the house before taking off down the street. Dad got home about 20 minutes later. Felt like an eternity, according to Mum. The man was never caught, and we never saw him again. And I really hope that I never do, even though I wouldn't know him if I saw him. Pride lived till she was 13 and was the most spoiled dog ever after that. I really don't know what would have happened to Mum or me without her. This happened about a year ago. So I was on Grindr looking for either fun dates or new friendships. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Grindr, it's a social media app that is designed primarily for gay men and many people use it to hook up with other men. So one day I was scrolling and I received a new message from a guy who we'll call Brian. I took a look at some of his profile pictures, read his bio, and decided that I was interested in him. We started messaging back and forth and he seemed to be really kind, a charismatic guy who really knew how to hold a conversation. Something that is very hard to come by on that app. A few days went by and we eventually exchanged numbers and he seemed nice enough. And I wanted to see if he was as great in person as he was over text message. So I asked him if he wanted to go on a date with me, and he very happily agreed. So I scheduled a date with him, and the plan was that I was going to drive to his place and pick him up, and we'd grab some lattes at my favorite local coffee shop, and it was around 6 p.m. I sent him a text message to tell him that I was leaving my house, to which he responded with a quaint, "I can't wait to meet you." I smiled at his supposed kindness, and then in the middle of driving to his house, I received a phone call from him, so I picked up, and the conversation went mostly as follows. "Hey Brian, what's up? Hey, a quick change of plans. I'm sorry to do this, but I'm feeling tired and I'd rather not go out. Would you be okay with just staying at my place? We can watch some shows and order some takeout." I mean, that's not what I really had in mind. I really like to go out and do things on the first date. Don't be such a buzzkill. Just come over. I won't show you a bad time, trust me. As he spoke on the phone, I just got a really strange feeling in my gut, like something was wrong about how he talked to me. Before I met him, I imagined his voice and inflections to sound a lot more light-hearted because of the way that he texted was very whimsical and fun. But over the phone, he talked as if he was kind of in a bit of a hurry, perhaps slightly frantic. However, despite my gut feeling, I decided that I should accept his offer. Maybe he was just tired or stressed or nervous from the workday or something. I pulled into his driveway and he greeted me at his door. He looked like his picture and he was very handsome. He was wearing fashionable glasses and his dark straight hair contrasted with his light skin. When we go inside, I was greeted by one of his roommates who was playing Dark Souls in the living room. I wanted to be polite, so I approached the roommate and introduced myself. I didn't want to come off as rude to Brian in case this date ended up going really well. But while I'm talking with his roommate, Brian calls my name and beckons me to walk inside his bedroom. I politely excused myself and followed Brian into his room. Now, when I walked inside, I saw something straight out of a fucking no-sleep story. Only this was real and right in front of me. There were candles just lit everywhere, and when I got a closer look, I noticed that there were several altars scattered across the room. Effigies of ancient-looking figures, animal bones, jars with unidentifiable liquids inside, some sort of dagger next to a cat skull, I think. The whole shebang. I don't remember all the altars, but I do remember a couple, and one of them was on the floor, and there was a glass container that held some kind of yellow liquid with animal skulls surrounding the container. Another altar was on a shelf next to his bed, and this one had a few candles surrounding some kind of doll with its eyes sewn shut and its hands missing. Now, that one was creepy and super bizarre, I admit. A part of me was telling me to nope the hell out of there immediately, but I thought that maybe I was just overreacting to somebody else's religious choices. I didn't know much about cult religions, so I didn't want to assume that this guy had any kind of malintent. Plus, I can be a little reactive at times, so I decided to stay and go along with the ride. When we walked into his room, I wanted to calm my nerves, and because I have a really curious mind, I decided to ask Brian about what these altars were for. He told me that he'd tell me about them later, which was a weird response, but again, I just kind of brushed it off my shoulders, thinking that he might just be a bit eccentric. I can be a little weird too, after all, so I just tried to be empathetic and understanding. Then I point to one of the altars and asked about it. He frowns at me then and scowls. "Don't touch that." His voice startled me too. His intense inflections, paired with his angry expression, sent a lump straight to my throat. And, quite honestly, I felt threatened. I was almost 4 feet away from the altar, not even close to touching it, and yet he just yelled at me like a father yelling at his kid to stop messing around at church. I was confused and thinking that I'd done something wrong, so I apologized. And in the blink of an eye, his scowl turned into a smile and he kindly invited me to sit with him to watch a show. But what really weirded me out was the fact that his smile looked and felt genuine. He had just gotten angry, but all of a sudden he just didn't care and served me up a really kind disposition. I was unsure of how to process what had just happened, so I decided to just sit down with him, and he seemed to be acting pretty normal once this ordeal had happened. So we just started to talk about ourselves, and after some time he became really sweet and soft-spoken, similar to how he was over text messages, and we were able to share some stories about our lives and whatnot. It was starting to feel like an actual first date, and my nerves subsided a bit. I was probably just overthinking everything else. But then he turns on the TV, and mind you, I was still a little freaked out by his random outbursts, so I was still on guard. So I offered to invite his roommate to come and hang out with us. Brian's roommate seemed like an old average Joe kind of guy when I met him, and I just wanted someone else to be there to act as a bit of a buffer. I wanted to see how he would act around other people, but when I gave him my idea, he just immediately shut me down, and his personality switched from easygoing to stressed and kind of angry. He started cussing out his roommate to me, making it clear that he absolutely hated him. The switch was just so jarring too that I actually started to panic again. Then he changed the subject and started to talk about me. He said that he found me really attractive, and in the process, his fingers started to graze my thighs. I needed a second to collect myself, though, so I excused myself to get some water. When I stood up, he immediately slapped my ass and told me to not take too long. I walked out, closed the door behind me, and started to make my way for the kitchen. I was hoping to chat with his roommate on the way and see if I could ask him about Brian, but he was asleep on the living room couch, so I just made a beeline to the cabinets in search of a cup. I thought about walking out at that point and just driving home because I didn't appreciate his sudden touchiness, but I started to get paranoid. I mean, he had all those altars and he didn't really tell me what the altars were for. I've seen some horror films about the occult and I truly had no idea what this guy was capable of. Yeah, he was sweet at times, I admit, but he was showing me some really aggressive behavior too. Who's to say that this guy isn't able to put some kind of voodoo curse on me or something? Dramatic, I know, but you can never really be too sure, right? So I grabbed my water and I cautiously head back to his room. Now, when I walked back inside, I saw him sitting on the couch with his legs crisscrossed and his eyes closed. When I approached him, I saw his mouth moving, but I didn't hear anything coming out from it. Weirded out by this, I called his name, but he didn't respond. That was weird. So I called his name a second time, and he opened his eyes, uncrossed his legs, and went back to watching TV without at all addressing what he was doing. And I mean, what the hell, right? I was getting really worried at this point. I did what I could to keep my cool. I didn't want to do anything to upset him or make him lose his cool. So I sat next to him on the couch and we started talking. Once again, he was completely normal. Unnervingly normal, actually. It's like I was in the room with a real-life Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, except Brian was able to switch between them seamlessly. I needed to do something, but what the hell was I supposed to do? I couldn't call him out because he might lash out in some malicious way, but I didn't want to stay because he was freaking me the hell out. In the end, I just stay and try to devise some kind of plan to just get out of there without making him angry. At some point, he gets up to grab his phone, and I thought I would try dishing out the same kind of arse grab that he gave me when I went to get some water. And maybe it would release the tension that I was feeling. Maybe he'd like it, and I'd make him less aggressive. Regardless, I wanted to try something. I made my move and gave him a cheeky ass grab, and immediately he turned around and swatted my hand away and lunged at me. He had his hand curled up in a fist and he flung it towards my face. His fist was inches away from making connection with my right cheek, but he stopped mid-punch. In that moment, I saw that his eyes were wide open and his facial expression was cold and emotionless. He was right in my face. My heart was beating so fast that I felt like I was seconds away from an aneurysm. He was looking directly at me and my eyes stared back, and at that moment, I felt like prey to a predator. Then he uncurled his fist, put his icy hands on both sides of my face, and started to squeeze. He said to me, "You're just so cute." He pulled me in and forced a kiss, and I did absolutely not want to kiss him, but I was paralyzed and couldn't will myself to push him away. His words were patronizing, sort of like he was talking to a dog as well, and it felt even more like this because he had just scrunched my face against his. I felt disgusting kissing someone who had almost punched me in the face, but there was nothing I could do in that moment. Again, I didn't want to risk pissing him off and escalating the situation. He slowly pulled away, gave me another sweet smile, and sat down, pretending like nothing had just happened. Just started staring at the TV again. And at this point, yes, I'm definitely over this, completely. His behavior was becoming more erratic and more unpredictable every moment. His room was creepy as shit. He clearly had associations with the occult, and frankly, he was scaring me. I eventually decided that I'd rather deal with the voodoo-looking altars later on than stay in this house and have to put up with the immediate danger. So I snapped myself out of my anxiety-induced trance, stood up, and told him that I was starting to get sick and that I wanted to go home. He got angry and tried to convince me to stay the night, but I gathered my courage and insisted that it was time for me to leave. He begrudgingly let me, but it was clear that my decision pissed him off. Honestly, though, I didn't really care anymore. I said my goodbyes and told him that I'd text him later, thinking hell no to myself while doing so. I got in my car and drove home shaking and sweating. I felt relieved to get out of there, but nervous that he might try to do something in the end. The uncertainty of it all was what truly shaked me up, but thankfully, no actual harm came to me. But who knows what would have happened if I had actually stayed, though. After that, I blocked Brian's number as well as his Grindr profile, and even now I keep my own Grindr pictures private. I haven't heard from him since, but I still fear that he's going to try and come after me, somehow. My parents and I used to go to an old fancy restaurant by the docks, and while it's still there to this day, we haven't had the chance to go back. I've been going to the same restaurant for as long as I can remember, really, and I love the food. However, I don't remember this encounter. Maybe that's a good thing too. So in 2003, my parents decided to take me to the restaurant for the first time and have a nice evening meal. My dad and mum ordered their usual, and she ordered me something off the kids' menu. I ended up eating my mother's food because of how much I liked it, but my mother's a sweet woman, so she didn't mind. Just as we were finishing our meal, though, an older woman waltzed up to the table and said, "You know, when I saw you two walk in with your baby, I thought, oh no, it's going to ruin my dinner. But your baby is so well behaved and pretty too. I would love to have your baby." My mum laughed it off as a joke and thanked the woman for her kind compliments. The woman walked back to her table and sat down next to an older man, probably a husband or something. But my mum said that whenever she looked at the couple, they had their eyes just locked onto me. She did her best to just ignore it, but as we were about to leave, the woman walked back to the table and said, "I would really like to have your baby." My mum got really creeped out and tried her best to keep her composure. And she said, "She's not for sale, sorry." And the woman just said, "But she's so pretty, I would like to have her." My mum told the crazy lady that she couldn't take me away from her parents. The woman scoffed and walked towards the exit, with her husband, or whoever he was, standing next to the door, eyeing us down. My dad didn't do anything for some reason, probably because he knows that he's big enough to do some damage if the woman tried anything. I'm glad that I don't remember this, but it's a creepy story nonetheless. So my experience happened about 2 months ago. A friend of my girlfriend asked us to watch her and her husband's house for 2 days while they were away for a wedding, mainly to feed their 2 cats, etc. The thing is, though, is that their house had a gruesome murder happen there a few years prior. The husband was killed with a blunt object in the garage, and his wife's throat was cut in the main bedroom by a former employee of them. And both of us knowing what happened in that house, we were already pretty freaked out by it. So the first night, me and my girlfriend had an argument, and she decided to sleep on the couch in the living room. Now, the position she was laying in, she could see into a small room that leads to a bathroom, but at the entrance of the room there was a PC desk with a chair and whatnot. I was getting ready to sleep on the other couch, sleeper couch, when I noticed she suddenly jolted up without saying a word and wanted to switch couches. Upon switching couches, she eventually fell asleep, and I was lying awake when I heard clicking noises in the storage room that you have to enter through the kitchen. It was an open-plan house, so the living room directly led into the kitchen. I noticed the clicking noises and immediately got freaked out and went to go sleep next to my girlfriend eventually. The next morning I told her what I heard, and she said the reason she jolted up like that was because she saw someone sitting in the PC chair, but she immediately said that she may have just imagined it. That evening we decided to sleep in the guest room. No way I was sleeping in the main room where the woman was killed. Eventually, we settled in ready to sleep when I asked her if I should activate the alarm, but she said no because she might have to go and pee at some point in the night. At around 2 a.m, we both woke up from one cat meowing, but it kind of sounded more like a cry, and it just wasn't normal. The cat meowed consistently, but each meow lasted like 10 seconds as if it was trying to get our attention. I told my girlfriend to stay in the room, and as I was standing in front of the closed guest room door, I thought to myself that someone was going to be in the house, given its history with the murder and whatnot. So I opened the door quickly, living room clear, and as I turned left into the living room and started walking towards the kitchen, I saw the one cat looking really frightened behind a cupboard towards the storage room. As soon as I got next to the cat, I heard something move and bang really loudly in the storage room. I immediately yelled for my girlfriend to get the cell phone ready while I grabbed a folding knife that was lying on the kitchen table. I walked slowly towards the storage room, scared shitless but ready to face whoever was in there. I took a deep breath and entered the room quickly, but to my surprise, nothing was there. The windows were closed, so it couldn't have been a wild animal or anything. The second cat seemed relaxed, while the other one was definitely tensed up. It couldn't have been another cat or anything. Note too that this is the same room that I heard the clicking noises the night prior. Needless to say, though, I was very happy that was our last night in there. I'm 23 and I'm a descendant of the Whaley House in San Diego, California, and my entire family, to my knowledge, has had multiple encounters with a being that either followed our family, one person at a time, or each of us is just more in tune with the supernatural and we've all gotten our own personal haunting or some bullshit like that. Now, growing up with my parents, things would disappear in the home and reappear in the least used rooms of the house and would almost appear to be hidden in them. Sometimes objects would be exactly where they weren't 10 minutes later in plain sight, same room that you were in. There'd be noises in the attic above my room in the second floor. There'd be random sounds, hearing my name called from somewhere in the house where no one was, peeking out of my room and asking if my parents had called for me, and getting a no as a response was pretty normal, pretty much a daily thing in fact. We all had our own interactions with this being in our home, and it was always a mild annoyance at most, with some slight fear, because obviously, what can you do about a stapler reappearing on your desk after you needed it 10 minutes ago and it wasn't there? And what can you do when the remote ends up in the bed in the upstairs guest room where no one goes? But my dad even has video of an I Love Lucy lunchbox walking forward on a shelf, teetering on the edge as if someone had gently pushed it, thinking that's enough to make it fall. It wasn't enough to make it fall, and so this thing slammed it to the ground instead. It was in the middle of the day while my dad was home, sick, alone, right in front of him, and no shits given. This story is to show that these beings don't care if we know that they're there. He would also game in our kitchen on the PC setup that we had, and he'd play WoW until around midnight to 2 or 3 in the morning sometimes. He'd have our dog's toys thrown at him occasionally with much more force than a dog could ever muster. Maybe thrown isn't really the right word, but tossed at him, I guess. I actually saw it happen one time too when I was coming into the kitchen to grab a snack, and it really messed with us, but we both just kind of joked it off. I mean, if it wanted to hurt us, it probably would have by now, right? Push someone down the stairs, drown them in the pool, drop a toaster in the bath, whatever, but it never harmed us. Not even a scratch. Now, I know stories like this are a dime a dozen when it comes to our house is haunted, so I'm going to delve a little deeper into my personal experiences with this being that I've dubbed Jimmy. According to my grandparents, the Whaley side grandparents, they would hear me talking to a boy from the backyard without hearing the other boy's voice. They would look out the window and see me swinging on the swing like I was being pushed by something. They didn't interfere with it because, well, what can they do about it but scare their grandchild and ruin their imagination? And even past that, what do you do to combat a being that you have no knowledge on and that you can't even see? But my parents also heard conversations between Jimmy and I. They all sounded like normal, harmless conversations to myself, but I would answer back to a question that had been asked, that I may not have been smart enough to think about myself. Answering questions of higher caliber than 4-year-old me should have been able to muster up. I don't remember any of the conversations, and as I've grown older, he's interacted with me less and less, it seems. I honestly didn't even know about any of the interactions that I'd had with the imaginary friend named Jimmy until my grandparents brought it up to me while I was visiting them, and they prefaced it by saying, "We think you're old enough to know now, but your imaginary childhood friend was real and he wasn't human. We would hear you talking to someone, full-on conversations, and we'd sometimes hear a voice that wasn't yours, but it never seemed outright dangerous or malicious, etc., etc., stuff like that." It's important to note too that none of these conversations were directly around other people. Everyone would at least be one room away or a good bit off from me when Jimmy would come around. After hearing the information about Jimmy, I started to get bits and pieces of memories back together, kind of fragmented from a childhood view, which is how they're remembered. It's hard to make sense of it, in other words. But I definitely felt like something was always there and always has been, and it kind of reinforced that feeling hearing this from my grandparents. Now, I knew that I was haunted before receiving this information from my family, but hearing the name Jimmy in that kind of context brought a feeling with the name, sort of like familiar, a sort of curiosity or maybe even fear a little bit. I was pretty sure that he hadn't hurt me though, well, probably at least. But anyway, now for my personal stories and encounters, both prior to and post hearing about Jimmy. So I'd be playing WoW by myself at home while my family was out, and sometimes I'd turn around and see a tall, dark mass with red, smoke-filled eyes watching me from across the room, and he would always disappear the moment that I noticed him. This didn't happen often, but I always got that chill in the back of your neck that crawls down your spine. That feeling you get when some unnatural ass shit is happening around you. I would see it outside of my home sometimes too, like it was following me in particular. I'd be in school sometimes too and feel a solid tug on my backpack to pull me backwards, get the similar chills, turn around and only to find an empty hallway, and then just continue on my way to class. That was as far as things went for a while as well. There'd be noises throughout the house here and there where nobody was, more so when I was home alone as well. But sometimes it would also happen with my parents or friends over. Living with it, you eventually adjust to it and just get tired of it, and it'll start to frustrate you. You'll yell at it to shut up because it's 3 a.m. on a school night and you need sleep, or you're trying to relax or whatever. And fear eventually just turns into exasperation. But one night, the exasperation turned back to fear rather quickly though. So, I was falling asleep and I heard a series of knocks in the house as I was quickly dozing off. All I remember from the dream that I had that night is that I got out of my bed, heard voices calling me to our game room from the deepest corner of the house, farthest away from where anyone would hear anything. I was drawn to the corner by some kind of a force or something, and having no fear of the paranormal anymore, only anger and exasperation at the minor annoyances that I'd been forced to live throughout my life with, I walked to it confidently. It was darker than the rest of the room by a lot, and the closer I got to the corner, the worse I felt too. But dread took over my body eventually, and I got pulled into the corner by seemingly a horde of demons, and as I called out for help, I had no voice to call with. The words just caught in my throat, and no matter how I forced them out, no sound came, not even gurgles or chokes, just silence. I don't know how long the dream lasted, being swallowed by darkness and demons, unable to scream, powerless and overcome by dread, but it stayed with me upon waking too. But that dream was 7 years ago, and I can still remember every detail of it. I still get that dream sometimes too, but that nightmare to this day. And I honestly just don't have the words to describe the horror that these dreams bring to me, feeling so powerless against something like that. I don't know if it was a dream or some sort of astral projection or what, but I wish that they would just stop. I've also moved several times since then, and paranormal presences have followed me, or I've found them every time that I've moved. I lived in Denton with the famous Goatman's Bridge, and spent multiple nights out there by myself trying to find something, and just enjoying being outside and alone. Being an only child and an outdoorsy person, I love being alone outdoors. It's peaceful. Most nights out there I'd see nothing, but I always got that tingling feeling on my neck that something was just looking at me. When I would try to take people out with me, they would be all in for it until we got a little ways in, and then they would get the same feeling that I did and want to get out as fast as possible. And to be honest, I can't say I blame them. It was always a bit stronger of a neck-tingling feeling with people there as well. I really don't know what's in those woods, but it followed me every move while I was out there, and I never once felt like I was truly alone. But I settled for mostly alone because, well, it seemed to leave me alone, and I just wanted to fish in peace anyway. Some nights, though, I would see a really tall, kind of misshapen figure dart between trees or hide behind trees across the riverbank. I even participated in some pagan rituals out there, and on the last one I participated in, a monarch butterfly flew over and landed on my finger. Then, as soon as the fire was lit, it started to dart among the flames like it didn't want them there, like it was warning us to go. So my friend and I quickly put out the fire, and no sooner than we had when I felt arguably the largest neck tingle that I've ever had. We got the hell out of those woods, and the butterfly came with us. It seemed like it just refused to leave us, and even got in our car with us. I dropped my friend off at her place, and she took the butterfly with her to care for it, and gave it some food and whatnot, check it for fire damage, etc., and then she let it go. Eventually I drove home that night, and I had my neck tingling the whole way home, and everything just seemed slightly off to me. It was the way my car was driving, the roads, the other drivers, even walking into the apartment was just weird. I don't really have a word for it, but it was kind of like everything familiar to me was just a little bit different somehow. I got inside, locked the doors, closed the windows as tight as I could, drew the blinds, and as I was lowering the blinds, I saw a tall dark figure with red misty eyes looking up to my third-floor apartment from ground level across the way. The same kind of figure that I'd seen playing WoW in my room growing up. There was one other time too that my friends and I were going through a cemetery to get to their apartment faster. There were 4 of us in total. My friends, we'll call them friend 1 and 2 and 3, we were scouting out the cemetery for the exit gate on the other side. Couldn't find one, and so we walked back to where the entrance should have been, and we just couldn't find it. Now, I'm not saying that it wasn't there, I'm just saying that we really couldn't find it anywhere. We were in college, and it was pretty late. We were a little bit drunk too, but not shit-faced by any means. And the point is that, as far as we knew, we just had this big gate all the way around us with no way out. This obviously freaked us out a bit, so we started walking towards the far fence to their apartment, and we were just going to hop it. Then, friend 1 says, "Hey, do you think we could look into that building?" The building was a small crypt or morgue type building. We all told him that we shouldn't, and just wanted to get out of there. And well, friend 1 went to check it out anyways, and as we rounded the corner of it, I had a great idea. I'll scare him by creeping around him. I told friends 2 and 3 my plan and hopped to it. I crept around the same corner that he did, made sure that he rounded the other corner of the building, then crept up some more, peeked around, and I didn't see him. So I went around the corner again, and just then I heard movement behind me. Assuming it was him, I laughed aloud and said, "Haha, you got me, man." And as I turned and saw him peek his head out around the corner and disappear again rather quickly, I then looked over at my friends around the corner. I was on the back of the building away from my friends about 10 yards away and saw all 3 of my friends slowly walking off, knowing that I'd catch up to them and laugh about my failed prank. The question is, who the fuck was behind that other corner? I looked around the whole building and I didn't see anyone, so I jogged over to my friends and told them that we really need to get out of this graveyard. My friends know me pretty well, and I'm a pretty comedic guy, and I joke around a lot, but they could see how serious I was, and we beelined it to the fence and hopped it as fast as we could. I told them what happened when we got inside, and friend 1 said the reason that he noped away from the building so fast was because he got scared and felt like he was being watched, and now he's glad that he did. I can only assume that it was Jimmy. In fact, that all might have been Jimmy, who knows? I mean, I have a lot of questions, and I just have so few answers. Is it really Jimmy? What is he? Why me? Why is he still here? Why did the butterfly cut off the ritual? It wasn't even a ritual for summoning anything, it was just a ritual to the moon on the night of the supermoon. It wasn't necessarily supernaturally related. Why would he pick me and stay with me from childhood? Is he connected to my dreams? Am I connected to him? These questions just go deeper and deeper, and honestly, it all keeps me awake at night. I've recently moved 6 hours again, and I'm living with my parents again as of 3 weeks ago. The same things have started up, and I went to bed watching an anime on my phone. It died mid-show, so I put it in the charger. I woke up in the morning and my phone was on my dresser, across the room, perfectly aligned with the dresser's edges. I hear banging again too, and I hear my name being called. And my biggest question is, what the hell does Jimmy and the paranormal world as a whole want from me? Why can't they just leave me the hell alone and let me live a normal life? Is this going to end badly for me? I have a lot more stories to share, and this is honestly just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know if I'll ever tell those stories, which is why I included so many in this one. It just depends on the reaction I get from this, I suppose. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and it is 100% the truth, I promise you that. Whether you believe me or not, though, that's up to you. When I was in the 5th grade, my family moved because our previous house was starting to become too small for us. The house was only 10 years old at the time and in a really nice neighborhood. When we met our neighbors, they would tell us that everyone who lived there only stayed for about 2 years and then moved. My family shrugged this off though, thinking that the previous owners might have just found new jobs or just didn't like the size of the house or something. But over the years, I had multiple creepy experiences in the house that were always shrugged off by my parents. Random phone calls from the house to our phones, things being moved in the morning, even waking up to having my comforter ripped off of my bed. Most of the time, I just thought that maybe I had moved stuff and forgot about it, but I would still get moments walking through the house feeling as if I were just being watched. Our dog would also just randomly focus in on an object and follow whatever it was. Creepy, yes, but nothing too terrifying. Fast forward a few years and I was home alone one night with the dog. I took her for a walk around dusk through the neighborhood as I had done hundreds of times. As I was nearing our house, I noticed that a light was on in one of the second floor windows. This window led into my parents' walk-in closet, so I figured maybe they forgot to turn it off. As I was walking up the driveway, I started to get that feeling though of just being watched again. And when I looked back up at the window, I could now see a silhouette of a person standing by the window. I immediately stopped and whatever was behind the window flicked the light switch off in the closet. Right after that happened, my dog took off towards the house and started barking at the windows on the first floor, circling the house barking non-stop. The first thing I did was call every number in my family to make sure that nobody had gotten home while I was gone. After each phone call, I started to become more and more terrified as I learned that each of them were miles away at the time. I explained exactly what I saw to my parents, and my father told me to walk around the house and make sure all the doors were locked. If one was unlocked, then I needed to call the police. I grabbed a crowbar out of the garage and started circling the house, only to find that every first floor door and window was locked. And this was the point where I became genuinely scared and didn't want to enter the house for fear that whatever I saw might be there in plain sight now. It was this point too where I started to think about all the small things in the past that happened and how I'd brush them off as just nonsense. After about 15 minutes of standing in the garage with a crowbar, I mustered up the courage to walk into the house. The dog ran in first and immediately started running around the house looking for something. I followed her, making sure that if something popped out, I would be able to hit it as hard as I physically could. The walk up the stairs to my parents' bedroom was the absolute most terrifying walk that I've ever had. As I walked up, I noticed my dog was standing at the bottom of the stairs, staring at something over my shoulder. But when I finally made it into the room and checked the closet, I found nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was almost hoping that I would see whatever it was so I could actually have visual proof that something was there. I've never been more freaked out in my life as I sat downstairs just waiting for my family to eventually get home. Fast forward to today and my parents still live in that house. They've had weird things happen only a couple of times over the years, but still don't believe that there was something paranormal in the house. My nieces always used to talk about a cat that they would see inside the heat ducts. From time to time, I would also house sit, but rarely spend the night, and if I did, the TV was always on with a light too. Still to this day too, I just feel like something else is in that house. My grandma was born in the 40s when folks were nice and nobody thought kidnappings were a common occurrence. She and her 9 siblings often took the trains by themselves, going to and from the big city where they lived and their grandparents' place that was a 4-hour train ride away. Usually they did this on weekends to give their mum and dad a break. Now one day, Grandma was 9, about to be 10 that weekend, and she was going to her grandparents' house the day before everyone else, by herself. Again, that was pretty common at the time and pretty ordinary. She got dropped off at the train station, got boarded on the right train by her dad, and off she went. Half of the way there, the train makes one of its stops and everyone is asked to evacuate because there's a malfunction with the rails. My grandma, Yara, is obviously pretty scared as she doesn't have any money to get on the train back, plus this was a bit different. In the middle of the chaos, a man dressed in a train driver's or pilot uniform approaches her and asks if she's alright. He's an authority apparently, so she sees him as safe and explains everything. He says that his next train is exactly towards where she wants to go and says that she can come aboard the cabin and ride all the way there as his co-pilot. She's obviously very excited and boards the train without a ticket and sits as his co-pilot as he promised. Halfway through the journey, she realizes that it's taking way longer than the usual trip takes and he's giving excuses that it's a different route. She steps away to go to the bathroom and he doesn't want to let her go, and that's when she starts to panic. She manages to convince him, and after about 2 cabins, she asks someone where the train is heading, and they say a completely different town as to where she would be going. She doesn't say how, but she was crying and wandering the cabins until she miraculously runs into one of her uncles, who listens to the story, and they get down on the next stop. He puts her on the right train, and she makes it back safely to the city where she lives, not her grandparents'. And so, apparently, none of her family made it a priority to find who this guy was, though I suppose it'd be easy since he worked for the train company and worked that route. Her uncle looked for the man a few times, but not with any determination. She had nightmares for years, and her parents stopped letting the little kids ride the train by themselves, and that was pretty much it. And for much of her youth, she was just petrified that she'd run into him again. G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.